All right, let's talk about something that sounds, kind of boring, paperwork, but is actually the secret weapon for any project success. We're going to dive deep into the purchase order and why it's so incredibly important. So let me ask you this. What's the one simple document that if you mess it up can cause budget blowouts, insane delays, and huge fights with your suppliers? Hint, it's not your master plan. It's something way more common, and its real power is kind of hidden in the fine print. Because here's the absolute truth of it. Ambiguity is the silent killer of projects. Just imagine ordering materials and you get the wrong grade, or you're expecting a delivery in 3 weeks but it shows up in 5, or worst of all, you get hit with a surprise freight bill you never budgeted for. These aren't just little hiccups, they're major failures, and they all start from a simple lack of clarity. And that, right there, is where the purchase order, or the PO, comes in to save the day. See, it's not just a shopping list you fire off to a supplier. When you do it right, it's a legit, legally binding contract that is specifically designed to kill all that ambiguity before it can mess up your project. So let's get really clear on what it actually does. The PO is the official single source of truth for a sale. It takes you from an informal chat to a formal agreement that locks in exactly what you're buying, how it needs to perform, and every single critical term of that sale. I love this quote because it just cuts right to the chase. A supplier gives you a quote, that's their formal offer. You send back a detailed purchase order that matches it. Boom, that is your formal legal acceptance. Right at that moment, the deal is done. It's solid. Okay, so what actually makes a PO strong enough to act as a shield for your project? Well, it all comes down to the details. Let's break down the anatomy of a really effective PO and see how it builds up your defense against total chaos. First up, you've got the nuts and bolts, the financial and logistical stuff. A really strong PO leaves zero room for doubt. Are there discounts? What if material costs shoot up? Who is paying for freight and taxes? And what is the exact delivery schedule for the exact quantities you need? Getting these things nailed down prevents all those nasty financial surprises later on. But look, it's not just about the money and the delivery dates, right? It's about quality. Your PO has to spell out specific requirements like submittals, things like shop drawings or samples that you have to approve. It should call out any certifications you need or even specific testing to guarantee the stuff you get is exactly what your project needs. So now that we know what needs to go in a PO, let's zoom out a bit and see where it fits in the bigger picture of a contract. This is where you can really see its legal muscle. Really, you can think of it like a simple two-step dance. Step 1, the supplier gives you a quote. That's their offer. Step 2, you issue a purchase order. That's your formal acceptance. When those two documents are in perfect sync, you've got yourself a solid, enforceable agreement. But what happens when they're not in sync? This brings us to probably the most critical and honestly the most overlooked point about purchase orders. This is the moment a project can start to silently fall apart. And here it is, the single biggest risk. If the terms in your purchase order are different from the supplier's original quote, you don't actually have an agreement. Nope. What you have is a ticking time bomb for a future fight. Let me walk you through a classic example. The supplier's quote promised delivery in 30 days, with freight included. But your PO says delivery in 21 days and doesn't say a word about freight. So, which is it? On day 22, are they late? When the invoice comes, who's paying for shipping? You see? This misalignment is a recipe for conflict. So the whole point is this. Before you hit send on that PO, you have to be 100% sure that both you and the supplier agree that the purchase order is the final deal. A quick phone call, a confirmation email, it can save you from a massive headache down the line. It's the agreement that gets rid of the risk. At the end of the day, you've got to think of your purchase order as the blueprint for that specific transaction. It's the detailed plan making sure the right stuff shows up at the right time for the right price and built to the right specs. It is so much more than paperwork. It's the promise of a smooth, successful project. So I'll leave you with this to think about. When you look at your own process, is your next purchase order a carefully built safety net designed to stop problems before they start? Or, because you skipped the details and the alignment, is it an accidental trap just waiting to spring? The choice and all the power is right there in the details.